Today is a day of a tale of tales that the world know very well. But to them that the story is told about forever remains a tale. But on this joyous day of days, what was lost have now been found. Them who helped to uncover the truth will live in the world renowned. Return of the King, return of the King, make way, make way, make way. Return of the King, return of the King, forever where he may reign. Time waits for no one, 'cause everyone's subject to time. From tales of God to tales of men, therein your answer will lie. Return to the King, return to the King, make way, make way, make way. Return to the King, return to the King, forever where he may reign. Greetings, 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 greetings. It is His Majesty, King Clifford Jefferson, ascended from Godfrey the Fifth Caliphate Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, as you know, as Jesus Christ. We like to give everybody a warm shout out, happy Xmas Day. We know that represents the key role, which is nothing more than a monogram of the consciousness, the mass consciousness. So we wish y'all a blessed day today. This is just a message from His Majesty in regards to understanding what this day really means to the English Stereotypical Church. And so this is a letter to you. And when I say letter, a letter is a message or an epistle out to the people. And we're going to show you exactly where the origin of the word letter come from, because there's two types of letters. You have an open letter and you have a closed letter. And an open letter is a letter to the public, and this is why it's open. And we also have a closed letter, which is a closed letter issued to individuals or privately, with their own in their own individual capacity. So we'll discuss these terms today, and we will bring some light into understanding the trickery of why we're in the condition we are in today. So, what greater time to bring this truth in than the day when we are concerned with about love, and love is the truth, and truth will set us free, and that's what I'm here to do. So, without further ado, in lieu of my queen, Sister Godwinson, uh, attending to some official business dealing with the festives, I greet you in the name of the English Stereotypical Church of England, representing the crown, the royal peculiar, and as always by my side, I have my Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont as Bishop of the Bishops, and he would give the formal introduction, and we can get on with this marvelous lesson. I digress.
Greetings, everyone within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. It is I, Archbishop Belmont, from the illustrious Noble House of Belmont. Today is December 25th, 2972, which is equivalent to the 2022 Gregorian calendar. And you know, like say here at the Third Temple English Church of England, we're known as Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which you will have come to know as Englishmen and English women going back to time immemorial. And like the king said, today is it is a great day. Christmas or Christ means messenger or anointed one, or key, which is mean the symbol you see behind of us that we're flying, which is our representation of our kingdom, which is actually the empire, which is actually planet Earth. For those of you who are up to date with regarding the mysteries that you have pretty much have lost regarding the understanding of what it is that have been hidden from us. And then the understanding of this day, December 25th, was the coronation of William the Conqueror, which he's the one who brought feudalism within our kingdom. And when we say Christmas, um, we're celebrating for those who actually lost their lives. It's not for what William the Conqueror bringing in feudalism, but it's for remembering our lost angels and ancestors, who try to do their best to maintain the sanctity of the Kingdom of England, which is known as the Kingdom of Heaven. And so for you to be able to put the pieces together, what it is that the king has brought, and he is the Cristo reincarnated. For those of you who have been waiting to hear the truth regarding the prophecy, that your biblical stories have pretty much had, shrouded in secrecy, all that we're bringing is really that prophecy being revealed. So please pay attention, because it is, once again, it is a beautiful time to be alive. And the church, which is the body of Christ, has returned for our lost English heirs within the diaspora that you known as Great Britain. And I digress.
Well said, Archbishop. There couldn't be a more beautiful time than living in these times and in these days, because as they always say, the truth shall set you free. And the truth comes in many forms. We go by word of mouth, and a lot of times that what we hear by word of mouth is not always true. And as I always say here at the English Church of England, he who writes your books does what? Set your timeline. And not time never was when we were not. It's a life of time become where we begin, the time where we end. So what better way to be able to correlate our identity with the letter of the law, because the law is the letter and the letter is the law. When we look at things given by our government, what we call our legal body, i.e. Our agencies, administrative agencies, they pretty much enforce the rule, and the rule is by way of open letters to the public. I'm pretty sure each and every one of us have went down to the county or the municipality and in the courtroom or the county building and looked at on the window, and they have posted up letters from these administrative agencies in regards to policies and rules based off land use regulations, land marketing, and land ordinances that they enforce by what we call public notice. That's called an open letter. And a lot of times when they're not open, then they're basically given to private individuals for disclosure purposes from the individual who actually issued the actual letter. So you have two types of things. You have an open letter and you have a closed letter. Now, when we use words, we don't use words ambiguously, because we know words affect us. Words have power. And one of the things we're saying when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, they said, why did it take him so long? He kept throwing out scraps because he informed them that your words have power. And you got to be careful what you say, because they could be detrimental to people or to others. It might affect them. So just to exclude the ambiguity and the illusionary or the colorfulness or what we call artificial, we're going to read it from a Black Law Dictionary for the word or the term letter. Okay, bear with me. I'm trying to move fast because my bishop has a little bit of time to work with me, so I'm going to do the best I can. A letter. One of the arbitrary marks or characters constitute the alphabet, and using a written language as a representative of sounds or articulations of the human origin of speech. We call this plain language or plain English. Like pretty much what we're doing now, way we can understand each other. We don't speak in another national language or another official language of another country. We speak in our official language and our national language, which is English, which is plain English, plain language, which means it's easily to understand, which means it's complete, concise, correct, and there's one more. Complete, correct, concise,
clear.
Correct, and clear. Thank you, Archbishop. All right. So we know that letters, when made into words, form sentences. Sentences form paragraphs. Paragraphs creates what we call a whole page, and pages create books, and books create communication between the reader and the writer. Okay? So we say letter is, as I said, one of the arbitrary marks of the character constituting the alphabet and used in written language as a representative of sounds or articulations of the human origin of speech. A dispatch or epistle or a written or printed message, a communication in writing from one person to others at a distance. Letters or epistles was the name of the answer returned by the emperor to a question of law submitted to him by the magistrate. Everything, like I said, when we use the word letter, we affiliated with law. So then they associate the word letter with something coming from an open letter or a private letter associated with a magistrate. Let's go on a little further. A communication enclosed, sealed, stamped, carried, and delivered by a private or U.S. Postal Service. I'll read that again. A communication enclosed, sealed, stamped, carried, and delivered by private or U.S. Postal Services. Now, most communication that we use to communicate with people close and far distances by what? United States Post Office.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do it that way, you either send it by yourself or you take it by yourself. All right? So it said, but the most important word in regards to the letter, whether it's open or closed, is the word sealed. Because it said a communication enclosed, sealed, enclosed and sealed. When you enclose something, that means you package it. That's pretty much like an envelope. So when you define package or enclosed, you're pretty much saying an envelope. But an envelope can't go anywhere until it's sealed by you privately or by a post office, i.e. the United States Post Office. You agree, Archbishop?
Agreed.
Okay, let's go a little bit further. Letters. In probate practice, including letters of testamentary, letters of guardianship, letters of administration, and letters of conservatorship. Okay, now this deals with grants. So that takes us to what we call land grants. So everybody write those legal definitions down, go to your Black Law Dictionary and get a clarity so you can understand where I'm going next. I'm going to move fast for the sake of time. Land grant. Read the first paragraph for me, Archbishop. 1 second.
A land grant. A land grant is a gift of real estate, land, or its use privileges made by a government or other authority as an incentive, means of enabling works, or as a reward for services to an individual, especially in return for military services. Grants of land are also awarded to individuals and companies as incentives to develop unused land in relatively unpopulated countries. The process of awarding land grants are not limited to the countries named below. The United States historically gave out numerous land grants as homesteads to individuals desiring to prove a farm.
That's fine, right there. So land grants are gifts, are grants. As you can see right here, see feudal land grants, fief. 1 second, Archbishop. Bull. Queen, could you call China and tell them I'm having class? Okay, yeah, so a land grant is a gift or real estate land or its used privileges made by a government or other authority as an incentive means of enabling work or as a reward for services to an individual, especially for return of military services. All right, and it also said the United States historically gave out numerous land grants as homesteads to individuals designed to prove on farms. This is called land use, land regulations, land marketing, right? This is created by way of a grant called fief. When we define fief, just for clarity, read that first paragraph, Archbishop.
A fief was a central element in medieval contracts based on feudal law. It consisted of a form of property holding or other rights granted by an overlord to a vassal who held it in fealty or in fee in return for a form of feudal allegiance, services, and or payments.
That's fine. Okay. So fief is the same as a land grant. when we in the United States use the word land grant, we don't call it land grant. We call it fee or fetal tenure that was given by way of what we call a gift. That's a grant. That's called a grant. A grant can be taken away if the compliance to the grant are not met based off the conditions, i.e. the contract. Most grants that were given here in the United States was created through what we call Virginia. And the first land grant given to Virginia was through Lewis Morris, who was who started what we call the head right system, which led to what we call the Middle Passage, which we all succumbed to be associated with what we call Atlantic slavery, or what we call the Atlantic slave trade. So let's get some qualification on that. Everybody look in Wikipedia land grant. This is one of our primary sources. It also has references that they get their source from. But our source is not Wikipedia. Wikipedia is just the baby food to be able to communicate with you because you don't communicate in plain language, plain English, i.e. the English language, because you're not English. So all this is new to you. So we have to give it to you like baby food. And this is the purpose for Wikipedia. Okay, let's go to colonial era, because we don't want to deal with the interpretation of a land grant from the United States. We have to deal with it from the time of the colonials, at the time of the colonies, when the founding fathers took their start from. Read that first paragraph, Archbishop.
English land grants. During English colonization of the Americas, the English crown gave land grants to encourage the foundation of overseas possessions in North America. King James I of England, and just for the clarity, this is the British monarchs, everyone. King James I of England, or the British monarch, granted a royal charter to the Virginia Company of London, English or British joint stock company founded to colonize Virginia. Similar schemes were later used when royal charters were granted by the Crown to British proprietary colonies in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. Some settlers were given land grants known as head rights, encouraging them to migrate to North America. Similar systems were used during the Dutch colonization of the Americas.
Very important. So it said they were giving land grants to actually colonize or settle in what we call the territory known as the East Coast, because the East Coast was under the Dutch colonization in America before it was restored by Charles II through the restoration of the crown. And they were only existed based off what we call land grants called head rights. So what are head rights? Just a quick brief for that. Read the first paragraph, Archbishop.
A head right refers to a legal grant of land given to settlers during the period of European colonization in the Americas. Head rights are most notable for their role in the expansion of the 13 colonies. The Virginia Company gave head rights to settlers, and the Plymouth Company followed suit. The head right system was used in several colonies, including Maryland, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Most head rights were for 1 to 1,000 acres of land and were granted to those who were willing to cross the Atlantic and help populate the colonies. Head rights were granted to anyone who would pay for the transportation costs of an indentured laborer. These land grants consisted of 50 acres for someone newly moving to the area and 100 acres for people previously living in the area. By ensuring the land-owning masters had legal ownership of all land acquired, the indentured laborers, after their indentured period had passed, had little opportunity to procure their own land. This kept a large portion of the citizens of the 13 colonies poor and led to the tensions between the laborers and the landowners.
Okay, let's see right here. Okay, right here. Issue right here. Now we're dealing with head right system. Start here, Archbishop.
All right. According to records, there was a large discrepancy between the number of head rights issued and the number of new residents in the colonies. This gap may be explained by high mortality rates of people during their journey to the colonies. Landowners will receive head rights for the dead, and thus the gap would widen between population growth and the amount of head rights issued. Another explanation suggests that the secretary's office that issued the head rights grew more lax. There were few regulations in place to keep the head rights system in check. Because of this, several head rights were claimed multiple times and people took advantage of the lack of governance. For instance, when a person was brought to the colonies, both the ship and the captain and the individual paying the transportation costs may have attempted to receive land patents or head rights for the same person. Another problem was that secretaries sometimes issue head rights for fictitious people.
Stop. So everybody read that for themselves. We're dealing with a head rights system built off slavery that were given based off what we call land patents. Land patents. Land grants were given based off land patents for slavery. It said another problem was the secretary sometimes issued head rights for fictitious people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they say secretary, they're talking about the Secretary of State. These are positions that cannot be held if it's not based off what we call a land pact. You can hold office based off what we call a land pact. Okay, let's move back. Read this last one right here.
As colonial law developed, head rights became patents, and the patentee had to improve the land. Under this doctrine of planting and seeding, the patentee was required to cultivate 1 acre of land and build a small house on the property. Otherwise, the patent would revert to the government.
Okay, all right. So we know a land grant is a land patent, and a land patent was given to settlers to be able to come over here by what we call land use regulations. Land use regulations are a violation of Title 42 United States Code 2000 CC. Everybody know their codes. You cannot impose a burden on a religious society with a land use regulation, a land marketing, or zoning regulations that excludes you from the jurisdiction in regards to any religious society, assembly, or person exercising of their religious exercise. And if you look at the definition of religious exercise as defined in Title 42, it means in regards to the use of land, buildings, and fixtures. That means that the land is allodial. So in actually it's saying that no land grant can be issued on allodial land based off Title 42 United States codes. We already talked about this in class. All right, let's go a little further. So since we know a land grant is a land patent, let's look at a land patent. Is my screen freezing?
No, it's up.
Okay, go ahead. Read that, Archbishop. Land patent. Everybody pay attention.
A land patent is a form of letters patent assigning official ownership of a particular tract of land that has gone through various legally prescribed processes, like surveying and documentation, followed by the letter signing, sealing, and publishing in public records made by a sovereign entity. It's the highest evidence of right, title, and interest to a defined area. It is usually granted by a central, federal, or state government to an individual, partnership, trust, or a private company. The land patent is not to be confused with a land grant. Patented lands may be lands that had been granted by a sovereign authority in return for services rendered or accompanying a title, or otherwise bestowed gratis, or they may be lands privately purchased by a government, individual, or legal entity from their prior owners.
Read first from first to the last again.
A land patent is a form of letters patent assigning official ownership of a particular tract of land that has gone through various legally prescribed processes, like surveying and documentation, followed by the letter signing, sealing, and publishing in public records, made by a sovereign entity.
Stop. Okay. So everything based off the land patent is a form of a letter patent, because only to prove you got a land patent, you must have a letter patent. And we know a letter patent is just an official letter that's open. because the word patent means open. So if you get a letter open, it's a public notice. If you get a letter closed, it's a private notice to an individual. So if it says a land patent, it's a form of a letter patent. If in order for you to have a land patent, because it said right here, the land patent is not to be confused with a land grant. So everybody assumes to have a land grant, which is nothing more than land using. If you don't have a letter patent to prove your land patent, then you don't own that land. Because it just said, read the first definition again, Archbishop.
It says a land patent is a form of letters patent assigning official ownership of a particular tract of land that has gone through various legally prescribed processes, like surveying and documentation, followed by the letters signing, sealing, and publishing in the public records made by a sovereign entity.
Stop. Okay, so it said signed, sealing. In order for something to be sealing, it's in the process. And the process of it is to seal. And everybody knows the definition of a seal. A seal is a mark that derives from the king. It's made from wax. So let's see if I got it here. We'll get to it in a second. And it said, and published in public record made by a sovereign entity. So the entity given the land patent must be a sovereign. And the only sovereign is what? A monarch. Is its highest evidence of right of title and the interest to defined areas, i.e. the land. It is usually granted by the central, federal, or state government to an individual partnership, trust, or private company. This is de facto. You're not supposed to do that because they're not sovereigns. Because it just said on here, the land patent is not to be confused with a land grant. How do we know that? Because we got a letter patent. We just defined land grant, and we know a land grant is not a land patent because it said in the highest evidence of right of title and interest to a defined area is usually granted by a central, federal, state to an individual partnership, trust, or privateship. It says the land patent is not to be confused with the land grant. Patent lands may be lands that have been granted by a sovereign authority in return for the service rendered or accompanying a title or otherwise bestowed as gratis, or they may be land properly purchased by the government, individual, or legal entity from their prior owners. So, as it said in the letter, they may also be land properly purchased. To purchase something means you don't own it. That makes sense, Archbishop?
Follow.
It makes sense to me. Okay. So we know a land patent can either come from a sovereign, and usually when it comes from a sovereign, it's based off what we call a grant. But it's not the same as a land grant because a land grant belongs to the one who gave it. That's the grant. All right, so let's go to letter patent. Read that, Archbishop.
Letters patent. A letters patent are a type of legal instrument in the form of published written order issued by a monarch, president, or other head of state, generally granting an office, a right, a monopoly, title, or status to a person or corporation.
Stop. So letter patent is an open letter, or always a type of legal instrument. A legal instrument is something that can be used in a court of law. It has legal effect in the form of a published written order issued by a monarch. So if it's issued by a monarch, it must have a seal. Everybody agree? It must have a seal. And when we say seal, we're not talking about an envelope. When we say seal, we ain't talking about a stamp from the United States Post Office. Because if it comes from the United States Post Office, it's not from the one who wrote the letter or the one who's receiving the letter. It's coming from an entity that's neutral. But we know a letter patent must have a seal. A sealed letter is that which have a seal on it. And a seal is a form of emboss or wax seal, not a stamp. None of those things will work because we know the origin in the English law is a seal to validate a letter patent. Then it takes the other formal process. All right. So it's a legal instrument in the form of a published written order issued by a monarch. When it became de facto, it became issued by what they call a president, because the president cannot hold office without a letter patent. Let's read why. Read, Archbishop.
Letters patent can be used for the creation of corporations or a government office, or for granting city status or a coat of arms.
Stop. Okay. When you look at our position and the state's government position, i.e., it's your state's government or your United States government. Your United States government is just what they call a Congress or a quorum of people coming together, passing acts in that quorum. So acts of Congress is nothing more than a statutory law created in that Congress by those group of people who created that Congress, which is nothing more than a statutory corporation made up of a statutory body of people called legal persons, having no authority at all because they don't have a letter patent, because a letter patent is issued from the monarch. Now the president, when they created what we call the United States was created by what we call Congress. Congress goes back to the different types of Congresses. Because before you had the United States Congress, you had what they call the Continental Confederation. Before you had that Congress, you had what they call the Second Continental Congress. Before you had that Congress, you had what they call the First Continental Congress. Before you had that Congress, you had what they call Albany's Congress. Before you had that Congress, you had what we call Stamp Congress. That goes into the Stamp Act, if y'all know that history. So we say a legal letter patent is the authority by way of a legal instrument to issue by a monarch, because it has the monarch seal, whether it's open or closed. Because back in the Middle Ages, when a letter was open, what they do is go post it on the tree. These are the wishes of the majesty, his king. If it wasn't issued on the tree or a building or some type of structure, then it must have been personal when it's delivered to the actual person with the king's seal. And the only person can open it is the person who the king intends it to be opened by. That makes sense to everybody? I hope so. Okay. So it says a letter patent can be issued by a monarch, which is the legitimate way, or by a president, which is the de facto way, because on a fool, it's de facto. Or another head of state. That means your county, municipalities, or agencies, corporations, etc. Because it said right here, letter patents are generally created to grant an office, a right, a monopoly, a title, a status to a person or corporation. So it's the ability to give you what? An office, a right, monopoly, title, status to a person or a corporation. Letter patents can also be used for the creation of corporations or governmental offices, or for granting city status or coats of arms. Notice your capital city of Washington, D.C. is named after George Washington, which bears his coats of arms, which was your first president. Your first president was one of the founding fathers who sat in Congress, who passed acts of Congress, such as what we call the Judiciary Act of 1789. Let's go a little further. Read the next paragraph, Bishop.
Let me see. Yeah, letters patent are read that part. Letters patent are issued for the appointment of representatives of the crown, such as governors, governors general, or commonwealth realms, as well as appointing a royal commission. In the United Kingdom, they are also issued for the creation of peers of the realm. In particular,
okay, read that paragraph again.
It said letters patent are issued for the appointment of representatives of the crown, such as governors and governors general of commonwealth realms, as well as appointing a royal commission. In the United Kingdom, they are also issued for the creation of peers of the realm.
Okay. Now, did you hear president in that sentence? It said governors and governor generals of commonwealths. It said nothing about presidents. We're about to show and validate that. Let's go here. United Kingdom, read that. There's a distinction between a letter patent, y'all, from The United Kingdom, known as Great Britain, which you're still subject to, because United Kingdom dissolved the Kingdom of England and Scotland and Ireland and united them as one, now called United Kingdom by the Treaty of Union of 1707. Prior to that, they had their own parliament. They had their own Congress, because Parliament is Congress. The people sitting in Parliament, the upper house, lower house, is nothing more than your council and General Assembly, as you call it today. Read what this paragraph says, and which the language we understand it here at the King's Bench. Read it, Archbishop.
In the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms, letters patent are royal proclamations granting an office, a right, title, or status to a person, and sometimes in regards to corporations and cities. Letters patent take the form of an open letter from the monarch to a subject. Although this is a legal fiction and they are in fact a royal decree made under the royal prerogative and are treated as statute law. Letters patent do not require the consent of Parliament.
Read that again.
It says, in the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms, letters patent are royal proclamations granting an office, a right, title, or status to a person, and sometimes the regards to corporations and cities. Letters patent take the form of an open letter from the monarch to a subject. Although this is a legal fiction and they are in fact a royal decree made under the royal prerogative and are treated as statute law, letters patent do not require the consent of Parliament.
This is what you call the demise of the crown. The demise of the crown means the transfer of the sovereign of the attributes and prerogatives of the king as a legal fiction. Why? Because he's called a corporation sole. He's called a corporation sole. All right? And he has the authority to issue royal prerogatives. Royal prerogatives are what you call writs. All right? Greetings, Brother Greg. Royal prerogatives are called writs. The United States cannot issue writs. The state's government can't issue writs. Only writs that can be issued is either by the King's Council or the governor in council. Because it just said up here, letter pads are issued for the appointment of representatives of the crown, such as the governors and the governors general of the commonwealths, as well as appointed royal commissions in the United Kingdom. They are also issued for the creation of peers of the realm. What people don't realize is that the crown, the King of England, or the office of the King of England, and the Council of Lords or the House of Lords were dissolved. This is called an interregnum and put under what they call a commonwealth. A commonwealth is headed by what we call a council of state or the privy council, which is nothing more than the governor and council. Nothing more than governor and council, what you have right here. Governor and council. The president does not have that authority as the governor, because the governor is the royal governor. The president is a fictitious entity as a head of state. We're about to prove it. Go right here. Now, we didn't read based off the United Kingdom usage of the letter patent, because we know letter patent means an open letter. And an open letter patent is an open letter that grants an office, a title, a status, a monopoly, or office. That's what a letter patent is. It can be either open or closed. Now, read what the United Kingdom says about a letter patent, Archbishop.
It says, in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms, letters patent are royal proclamations granting office, a right, a title, or status to a person, and sometimes in regards to corporations and cities. Letters patent take the form of an open letter from the monarch to a subject. Although this is a legal fiction and they are in fact a royal decree made under the royal prerogative and are treated as statute law, letters patent do not require the consent of Parliament.
Okay. Why? Because Parliament was dissolved and it was put under a commonwealth. That's why. And it says that royal prerogatives are treated as statutory law, which means that an operation of law. Statutory law is an operation of law because statutory law was created through legislation pursuant to the Constitution, whether it was the United States Constitution or parliamentary legislation, which is our Constitution, because the Constitution just means authority. What constitutes that law? Okay, so we already qualified United Kingdom, which is a letter patent or open letter, whether it's closed or open, issued by a monarch based off a grant that grants either office, title, status, or it can either use to create corporations as well as governmental offices, as well as it can create what we call your peers, and they also grant coats of arms. Now, our coats of arms is not granted. Our coats of arms were born with it. These are called your hereditary titles. These are the titles of your office, relative to who you descend down from. All right. So now you got a choice now, because you can either interpret it from the language of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth Realms, which were subject to the House of Lords under the authority of the King, called the King's Council. Now the authority called the Governing Council, and now been taken over by what you call the United States under the authority of what we call land patents. Read this, Archbishop.
In the United States, the primary source of letters patent in the United States are intellectual property, patents, and land patents. Though letters patents are issued for a variety of other purposes, they function dually as public records and personal certificates. In the United
Read
States,
that again.
the primary source of letters patent in the United States are intellectual patents and land patents. Though letters patents are issued for a variety of other purposes, they function dually as public records and personal certificates.
Okay, so we see letter patents in the United States is used for something other than the origin of what it was actually created for, based off land patents, open letter from the monarch. Can everybody, I'm pretty sure everybody's watching can agree to that. That is not being used based off the origin of how the United Kingdom is using it. Because we know the United Kingdom descended down from those kingdoms that was created before the United Kingdom, such as Ireland, Scotland, and France. And England, England, Ireland, and Scotland.
And Wales.
England precedes them all. England and France precede Scotland. All right. So we didn't even talk about them, because we're trying to see how they got their letter patents to even sit in these offices that they so-called say are commissioned. Because under what we call the Crown Act, under what we call King George III, he said even after the demise of the crown, the magistrate judges are to continue as if they were enforced at the time of the demise of the crown. And demise just means the transfer of the attributes and prerogatives of the monarch by way of what we call letter patents, because letter patents grants offices. Read that, read the next paragraph.
In the United States, the forgery of letters patent granted by the president is a crime subject to fine, imprisonment up to 10 years, or both. Without letters patent, a person is unable to assume an appointed office, such as an issue.
Read that again. Read that again. We ain't talking about United Kingdom, everybody. We're talking about right here in the United States. And this is under Title 18 of the United States Code 497 in regards to unlawful letter patent, which gives you the ability to hold an office, as just said. Continue. Read it from in the United States again.
In the United States, the forgery of letters patent granted by the president is a crime subject to fine, imprisonment up to 10 years, of both. Without letters patent, a person is unable to assume an appointed office. Such an issue prompted the Marbury versus Madison suit, where William Marbury and 3 others petitioned the United States Supreme Court to order James Madison to deliver their letters for appointments made under the previous administration.
Okay, let's get a little hit on the Marbury versus Madison case. James Madison was the Secretary of State for Thomas Jefferson when doing his inauguration as president, succeeding John Adams, who was succeeding George Washington, the first president of the United States. John Adams, the second president of the United States, was head of the committee, was one of the committee of 5 who created what they call the Constitution of the United States, which came to the Articles of Confederation. James Madison appointed 42 district court judges, because under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3, the only court that was sanctioned by the United States Constitution of 1789 was the Supreme Court. And it was given authority to create inferior courts. And the inferior courts are what we call these district courts that we have. And they were created not under the Constitution, but under the Judiciary Act of 1789, which was introduced by Richard Henry Lee, who created the Lee's resolution for the actual breaking away or dissolution from their subjectivity of under the British Crown of what we call Great Britain. This is the reason why they introduced what they call the Judiciary Act to set up their own Supreme Court, their own judiciary body. So with the Marbury versus Madison case, when John Adams appointed the 42 district court judges, Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, did not send them to be commissioned. Why? Because he said they were unlawful. So District Court Judge William Marbury, which was one of the 42 judges, filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court and requested that the Supreme Court issue a writ of mandamus to James Madison on behalf of not sending in their commissions as prescribed by John Adams, the second president of the United States, based off the Judiciary Act of 1789 that was signed by Thomas Jefferson, who was the president before John Adams, and introduced into law by what we call Richard Henry Lee, which was nothing more than an act passed by Congress. And the act passed by Congress is nothing more than the statutory law, like they do every day. If an act is passed by Congress that violates the Constitution, then that act or that statutory enactment is unlawful. So the Supreme Court ruled in favor of actually nobody. He didn't rule in favor of Marbury nor Madison. He didn't request that Madison allow the commission as it regards to the administration that was set up by Adams as well as Thomas Jefferson, based off this one point. Letter package. Let's look at Title 18, Section 1492. First, let's go here. History of the United States. Right here. Read this. Let's see, where is it at? Let's go back to my verse. Let's see, let me find it. Marbury versus Madison. Okay, read, start here, Archbishop.
Marbury versus Madison was a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case that established the principle of judicial review in the United States, meaning that American courts have the power to strike down laws and statutes that they find to violate the Constitution of the United States. Decided in 1803, Marbury is regarded as the single most important decision in American constitutional law. The court's landmark decision established that the U.S. Constitution is actual law, not just a statement of political principles and ideals, and helped define the boundary between the constitutionally separate executive and judicial branches of the federal government. The case originated in early 1801 as part of the political and ideological rivalry between outgoing President John Adams and incoming President Thomas Jefferson. Adams had lost the U.S. presidential election of 1800 to Jefferson. In March 1801, just 2 days before his term as president ended, Adams appointed several dozen Federalist Party supporters 2 new circuit judge and justice of the peace positions in an attempt to frustrate Jefferson and his supporters in the Democratic Republican Party. The U.S. Senate quickly confirmed Adams' appointments, but ongoing Secretary of State John Marshall did not deliver all of the new judges' commissions before Adams' departure and Jefferson's inauguration. Jefferson believed the undelivered commissions were void and instructed his Secretary of State, James Madison, not to deliver them. One of the undelivered commissions belonged to William Marbury, a Maryland businessman who had been a strong supporter of Adams and the Federalists. In late 1801, after Madison had repeatedly refused to deliver his commission, Marbury filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court, asking the court to issue a writ of mandamus, forcing Madison to deliver his commission. In an opinion written by Chief Justice Marshall, the court held, firstly, that Madison's refusal to deliver Marbury's commission was illegal, and secondly, that it was normally proper for a court in such situations to order the government official in question to deliver the commission. But in Marbury's case, the court did not order Madison to comply. Examining the law Congress had passed to define the Supreme Court jurisdiction over types of cases like Marbury's, Section 13 of Judiciary Act of 1789, the court found that the act had expanded the definition of the Supreme Court jurisdiction beyond what was originally set forth in the U.S. Constitution. The court then struck down Section 13 of the act, announcing that American courts have the power to invalidate laws that they find to violate the Constitution, a power now known as the judicial review, because striking down the law removed any jurisdiction the court might have had over the case. The court could not issue the writ that Marbury had requested.
Okay, let's see 1 second. Let's go to the Judiciary Act. Okay.
20 minutes, King.
Okay, gotcha. Let's go back to letter patent. Letter patent. Okay. So we go back to letter patent. It says right here. Read that again, United States. Right here, United States.
It says the primary source. The primary source of letters patent in the United States are intellectual property patents and land patents, though letters patent are issued for a variety of other purposes. They function dually as public records and personal certificates. In the United States, the forgery of letters patent granted by the president is a crime subject to a fine, imprisonment up to 10 years, or got to move to this, sorry, or 10 years or both. Without letters patent, the person is unable to assume an appointed office. Such an issue prompted the Marbury versus Madison suit, where William Marbury and 3 others petitioned the United States Supreme Court to order James Madison to deliver their letters for appointments made under the previous administration.
Okay, so we see in letter patents here in the United States, you cannot hold an office. And this was Marbury versus Madison case back in those days in regards to a district court judge such as William Marbury, which was one of the judges out of 42 judges appointed by President John Adams. Because in order for them to hold office, they need a letter patent. To have a falsified letter patent is violation of Title 18 United States Code 497. Let's see what that says. Read that, Archbishop.
It says, whoever falsely makes, forges, counterfeits, or alters any letters patent granted or purporting to have been granted by the President of the United States, or whoever passes, utters, or publish, or attempts to pass, utter, or publish as genuine any such letters patent.
I'm sorry, 1 second, yeah.
Any letters patent knowing the same to be forged, counterfeited, or falsely altered shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both.
Okay, so we know the origin of letter patents, which under the United Kingdom, i.e. the Crown, is based off appointing representatives for the Crown, such as governors, governor generals in the Commonwealth. The president is not using it based off the origin of a letter patent. They're using it to commission their judges and those people who hold their offices, which is a violation of Title 18 because it said whoever falsely makes, forges, counterfeits, or alters any letter patent, i.e. an open letter. If you have an open letter, where is your seal? It must have a seal, not the seal of your administration, because it just said the Supreme Court of the United States doesn't have the authority to issue a writ of mandamus, and writ of mandamus is the prerogative writ that comes from the authority that's given by a letter of patent that's issued by a minor. Because a letter of patent for a land patent has to have a seal. Everybody make sense?
Follow.
Okay, let's go here. Title 18, Section 101. Read that real quick.
'18 U.S. Code subsection 1001, statements or entries generally. A, except as otherwise provided in this section, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willfully, 1, falsifies, conceals, or covers up any trick, scheme, or device and material fact. 2, makes any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or representation, or 3, makes or use any false writing or document knowing the same to contain any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or entry, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 5 years, or if the offense involves international domestic terrorism, imprisoned not more than 8 years, or both. The matter relates to an offense under Chapter 109A, 109B, 110, or 117, or Section 1591, then the term of imprisonment imposed under this section shall not be more than 8 years.
Okay, that's good now. So what we're seeing here is that based off the letter patents, if you falsify the letter patent, and we can clearly see that the United States falsified the letter patent because letter patents are given to hold office, right? If the United States Congress was created by an act of Congress, I mean, by the people who are sitting in Congress, and that Congress originated from where? The Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was a result of the First and Second Continental Congress. When they all came together, then they created the Articles of Confederation. Read that first paragraph, Archbishop.
Says the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union was an agreement among the 13 colonies of the United States of America that served as its first frame of government. It was approved after much debate between July 1776 and November 1777 by the Second Continental Congress on November 15, 1777, and sent to the states for ratification. The Articles of Confederation came into force on March 1st, 1781, after ratification by all the states.
Stop. Okay, so we know by all the states you had an Articles of Confederation. Let's go to background real quick for the sake of time. Read background.
It says the political push to increase cooperation among the then loyal colonies began with the Albany Congress in 1754 and Benjamin Franklin's proposed Albany Plan, an intercolonial collaboration that helped solve mutual local problems. Over the next 2 decades, some of the basic concepts it addressed would strengthen, others would weaken, especially in the degree of loyalty or lack thereof owed the crown. Civil disobedience resulted in coercive and quelling measures, such as the passage of what the colonials referred to as the Intolerable Acts in the British Parliament, and armed skirmishes, which resulted in dissidents being proclaimed rebels. These actions eroded the number of crown loyalists, called Tories, among the colonials, and together with the highly effective propaganda campaign of the Patriot leaders, caused an increasing number of colonists to begin agitating for independence from the mother country. In 1775, with events outpacing communications, the Second Continental Congress began acting as the provisional government for the United Colonies. It was an era of constitutional writing. Most states were busy at the task, and leaders felt the new nation must have a written constitution, a rule book for how the new nation should function. During the war, Congress exercised an unprecedented level of political, diplomatic, military, and economic authority. It adopted trade restrictions, established and maintained an army, issued fiat money, created a military code, and negotiated with foreign governments. To transform themselves from outlaws into legitimate nation, the colonists needed international recognition for their cause and foreign allies to support it. In early 1776, Thomas Paine argued in the closing pages of the first edition of Common Sense that the custom of nations demanded a formal declaration of American independence if any European power were to mediate a peace between the Americans and Great Britain. The monarchies of France and Spain, in particular, could not be expected to aid those they considered rebels against other legitimate monarchs. Foreign courts needed to have American grievances laid before them persuasively in a manifesto, which could also reassure them that the Americans were reliable trading partners. Without such a declaration, Paine concluded, the customs of all the courts is against us and will be so until by independence we take rank with other nations. Beyond improving their existing association, The records of the Second Continental Congress showed that the need for a Declaration of Independence was intimately linked with the demands of international relations. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution before the Continental Congress declaring the colonies independent. At the same time, he also urged Congress to resolve to take the most effectual measures for forming foreign alliances, and to prepare a plan of confederation for the newly independent states.
Okay. So we just read the Article of Confederation, which was a result of all the states coming together from the Albany Congress to the First Continental Congress to the Second Continental Congress to the Continental Confederation, which created the Articles of Confederation, which brought forth the creation of what we call the Constitution for a new independent country. Makes sense to everybody?
Follow.
Okay. Now this is fraudulent because it said the introduction for separation was introduced by Richard Henry Lee by his resolution, and he introduced the Judiciary Act of 1789. Introduced Richard Henry Lee. He introduced the Judiciary Act, signed into law by the first President George Washington, which the Supreme Court just ruled in Marbury versus Madison, said they didn't have no lawful commission.
Mm-hmm.
We just read Title 18 United States Code 497 that if you gave out a false letter patent, then you were subject to go to jail for over 10 years and also fined. We know that they're letter patents because the only way you can sit in the office of George Washington or Richard Henry Lee, you must have a letter patent. And letter patent grants coats of arms. They weren't born with their coats of arms. They got granted their coats of arms by way of letter patents unlawfully, which makes them violate some Title 18 United States Code Section 101. Why? Because all this was done by what we call the creation of the Committee of Five, which involved who? John Adams, the one who issued out the 42 district court judges. Everybody see that?
Follow.
Read the first paragraph real quick.
The Committee of Five of the Second Continental Congress was a group of 5 members who drafted and presented to the full Congress in Pennsylvania State House what would have become the United States Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. This declaration committee operated from June 11, 1776 until July 5th, 1776, the day on which the declaration was published. The committee was composed of John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman.
Stop. Okay. So now John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were friends, but they were enemies for the political rival in regards to the position that Thomas Jefferson was getting from John Adams at the result of his inauguration. And John Adams had appointed 42 district court judges, i.e. magistrate judges, based off a commission that Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, James Madison, said were unlawful. So that meant that because of the Judiciary Act that was introduced by Richard Henry Lee, who initiated that there be a separation from Great Britain, which was the crown, which was the origin of where letter patent was created from. Everybody understand?
Follow.
So that makes sense. So that means that if your letter patent was not given from the crown, then that means that all the presidents who exist today and everyone who's holding the office today without a lawful land patent from the crown is going to jail. They are going to jail. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, they dead and gone. But those who were commissioned by them by way of Title 18, Section 1497, 497, who falsely makes, forges, counterfeits, or alters any letter patent granted or purported to have been granted by a president. Why would they put that there? Purport. Why would they put that there if it was lawful? And in closing, I'm going to tell you how it was lawful because you come to the understanding of where the United States got their origin. You think Archbishop was that. This goes back to what we call Great Union Flag. Read the first paragraph, Archbishop.
The Grand Union Flag, also known as the Continental Colors, the Congress Flag, the Cambridge Flag, and the First Navy Ensign, is considered to be the first national flag of the United States of America. Similar to the current U.S. flag, the Grand Union Flag has 13 alternating red and white stripes, representative of the 13 colonies, The upper inner corner or canton features the Union Jack or flag of the Kingdom of Great Britain, of which the colonies were subjects.
Read that last part. In which what?
It says the upper inner corner or canton features the Union Jack or flag of the Kingdom of Great Britain, of which the colonies were subjects.
They said subjects. The colonies were subjects to the Grand Union flag, which represents the Kingdom of Great Britain, which was either Ireland, Scotland, and England. And in this case, it's England, because those grants that were given under this flag was based off the East Indian Company, because the East Indian Company bears the same flag as the Grand Union. Let's see. This is where this Indian mess come from.
And point of interest, the fact that it's telling you it's called a company flag, they're letting you know that the United States itself is nothing more than a company.
Look at the date. That's the same date of the Marbury versus Madison case. 1801. Same year. Okay, read that first paragraph.
It says the East India Company, EIC, was an English, aka British, and later British joint stock company founded in 1600 by Elizabeth I and dissolved in 1874. It was formed to trade in the Indian Ocean region initially with the East Indies, the Indian subcontinent of Southeast Asia, and later with East Asia. The
Stop
company
right there. Let's just go into the history of the flag. Read that.
The flag of the East India Company was used to represent the East India Company, which is called EIC, which was chartered in England in 1600 by Elizabeth I, so that's British monarchs. The flag was altered as the nation changed from England to Great Britain to the United Kingdom. It was initially a red and white striped ensign with the flag of England in the canton. The flag displayed in the canton was later replaced by the flag of Great Britain, and then the flag of the United Kingdom as the nation developed.
Now look at this, y'all. Woo! This was there before that Great Britain's flag. This was the flag that was there with the 13 colonies in it. So you have been lied to. How we know that? I'll close with this.
And like I said, that their shareholders were Freemasons. So those who are in so-called government positions with the East India Company, aka the United States, are nothing more than Freemasons who are utilizing grants that were not actually given to them. Because for you to take over and be in a position of office holder, you had to have a letter patent, which includes a coat of arms. And that coat of arms had to represent that you come from a family that was represented from those kingdoms. So you couldn't be in a position of power if they didn't know who you came from. Who gave you that right?
The king gave you the right to have a letter patent. I didn't say it. The king owned all the land because the land is allodial. So if it's a land is allodial, that means you can't hold a letter patent. I didn't say it. The statute said it. Read it from Archbishop in closing.
I said Title 46, colon 3-6, gifts, grants, and conveyances by state allodial. It says, all gifts, grants, or conveyances made prior to and after July 4th, 1776 of any estate of inheritance by letters patent.
Read that again. Read that again. By letter patent.
Said all gifts, grants, or conveyances made prior to, and that's before July 4th and after July 4th of 1776.
Stop. Okay. You declared your independence on what day? July 4th, 1776. By who? Richard Henry Lee. Richard Henry Lee introduced the Judiciary Act, which signed by Thomas Jefferson, who's your first president. So that means that under Title 18, 497 and 1001 of Title 18, everyone who took office or hold office, I don't care what office, United States, state government, municipality, county, etc., are in violation because New Jersey statute 46:3-6 clearly says that all grants, conveyances made prior to your declaration of independence as unlawful because letter patents are what, Archbishop? Read it.
By letters patent under the great seal of this state or any other manner of this state, by the legislator thereof, or by the commissioners or agents of forfeited estates, or by other lawful and competent authority under the state, shall be and remain allodial and not feudal, and shall forever be and continue in free and pure allodium only, forever discharged of all feudal tenures and the incidents thereof and all other services whatsoever.
Now, once again, they clearly said that a land grant is not a land pact. Let's go back to the land grant real quick. Because land grant is fief. And he just said right here, no feudal tenure will actually exist anymore. Where's it at? Land grant. So all those who are, y'all better realize what y'all into. Land grant is a fief. And we just read in the modern day statute that they no longer exist anymore. Why? Because I am back. The king is back. How you know that? One more thing to close. 46:3-2. This is what they call, you don't need parliament for this. This is called by operation of law. This is the demand to transfer other attributes and powers of the crown by way of king, who is a legal fiction, i.e. corporation soul. Read that in closing, Archbishop.
46:3-2, certain tenures and holdings turned into free and common soakage. The tenures of honors, manors, lands, tenements or hereditaments, or of estates of inheritance at the common law, held either of the King of England or of any other person or body politic or corporate at any time before July 4th, 1776.
What year, Archbishop? What year they say?
July 4th, 1776.
So that meant that Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Richard Henry Lee, the Continental Congress, you're violating this statute right here. Because you are not a king of England or a person acting in the position of the king of England pursuant to his body politic. That's through what we call incorporation, which is what we call in the abstract world, incarnation, but in the contract world or the legal world, it's called incorporation, which means to personify. And with that, in closing, I love you all. Come home to your king so your king can recognize you through your coat of arms. And with that, I digress. I leave all closing remarks to those who are in the panel and close up with Archbishop. With that, peace and love. Archbishop, you got the floor.
Well, there you have it, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. The king has done a marvelous job on this December 25th, 2972 day to show you that he is who he say he is and come to do regarding to uplifting as well as revitalizing our lost inheritance regarding us as being Englishmen and English women within the Kingdom of England that has been usurped and hypothecated via merchants, or only have an obligation and the tendency and duty for them to continue to keep doing commercial activities, trafficking humans, stealing the lands, the minerals, and the rights from the Dejure common people, and keeping us in the perpetual state of slavery. And as the king has shown you, the only way for you to be able to return is going to be based off of you coming back underneath the king's protection, which is a royal prerogative via the coat of arms.
Stop right there. And just to show you, writ of mandamus was denied to a district court judge, James, what's his name? William Murphy, who was a district court judge who demanded that the Supreme Court issue a writ of mandamus. Now, let me show you what Joe King has done. One second, let me find it. I got you, Archbishop.
No, take your time, King.
Well, that's first of all, let me show you this one first. Where is it at? Share. It won't let me share. Why is it share? Share. It didn't allow me to share. Where are we at? Okay, let me see. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Read that, Archbishop. 1 second, let me pull it up. Read that. Come on.
All right, it says, Dear Mr. Jefferson, this office in the receipt of your papers dated November 27, 2022, and captioned Prerogative Writ Mandamus Quo Warranto. Please be advised that your papers cannot be processed for consideration by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not exercise original jurisdiction over applications for prerogative writs. Prerogative writs, which includes writs of mandamus, were superseded by Article 6, Section 5, Paragraph 4 of the New Jersey Constitution of 1947. The appropriate procedure for seeking relief that was formerly available by prerogative writ is to file an action in lieu of prerogative writs with the Superior Court Law Division pursuant to New Jersey Court Rule 4:69-1. Please be advised that your notice of petition for certification, and supporting documents have been filed and your case is pending for consideration by the Supreme Court. At this time, nothing further is required of you. Sincerely,
Okay.
Supreme Court's Clerk Office.
Okay, let me explain that to you. Under the 1947 Constitution, the Supreme Court fell under what we call the administrative laws, which is now pursuant to the Constitution because the Constitution of the United States violates the original Constitution of 1844 and 1776, which was based off the royal court and the Superior Court, which is why they said, once I exposed them with the writ, they said, well, we can't deal with that because you already exposed our authority, because the authority for a writ was based off the King's Council or the Governing Council, which is the Superior Court. So what they did is they, well, we're gonna look you out. We're gonna show you how to actually file a writ while we actually dealing with your petition for certification, because a prerogative writ should have been filed in Superior Court. And if they don't file it, then the proper way to go is to the district court. Why? Because the district courts don't have the authority to file a writ, as we see in Marbury versus Madison case. Why? Because they don't have the authority, because they sitting without a lawful letter patent, which is a commission to hold an office. But I'm gonna show you that I do in lieu of a district court, because look what they filed. If I can find it. How do I continue to go? Can everybody see that?
No, you got to share it.
All right, let me share. Everybody see that?
Yeah, I see it.
You got to turn it
Okay.
upside right.
I can do it now.
There you go.
Okay, we just make it bigger. Okay, this is filed in the district court. Now this is power. Read that what it said, Archbishop.
It says, docket text, writ of mandamus quo warranto from King Clifford Jefferson, attachment number 1.
Okay, now we just read in Marbury versus Madison that the Supreme Court couldn't issue a writ of mandamus for the district court judge, William Marbury. He's a district court judge, but yet this district court judge filed my writ of mandamus. If I asked them to file a writ of mandamus, they couldn't do it because they don't have authority, because it violates the Article 1, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. The only person that can issue a writ of mandamus is the person who has the legal right in that office, i.e. by way of letter patent, because letter patent means open letter. And the open letter is an open letter which is based off a seal. When I filed my writ of mandamus quo warranto, it had a seal on it. And look what they did. They filed it. Everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got one more for you. Okay. Where is that? more. Okay, here we go. Share. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Read that. What that say?
Docket text, writ of attaint from King Clifford Jefferson.
Okay. And in closing, what's a writ of attaint? And I don't have nothing else to say. Let's look up a writ of attaint. Two minutes, Archbishop. 2 minutes. Okay. Why is it going to the Judge of our statute? Wait up, it's 10. Come on now. It's 10. And this is all results. Okay, here we go. I was somewhere else. Rich. All right, let me share screen. And read that, Archbishop, and close.
Writ of attaint. A writ of attaint is an obsolete writ in English law issued to inquire whether a jury had given a false verdict in a trial. In criminal cases, the writ of attaint was issued at the suit of the Crown, and in civil cases at the suit of either party. The correctness of the verdict will be determined by a body known as the grand jury of attaint. This panel, consisting of 24 members, was twice the size of a normal jury trial. The party bringing the attaint will introduce only the same evidence that was originally given at trial, while the jury whose verdict was questioned was allowed to present new matter. If it were found that the erroneous verdict had been given, the wrong was redressed and the original jury was punished. The punishment inflicted was quite severe at the common law. The judgment was 1, that they should lose their liberum legem, right to give evidence to serve on the jury and become forever infamous. 2, that they should forfeit all their goods and chattels. 3, that their lands and tenements should be seized into the king's hand. 4, that their wives and children should be thrown out of doors. 5, that their houses should be razed and thrown down. 6, that their trees should be rooted up. 7, that their metals should be ploughed. 8, that their bodies shall be cast into the gaol.
Okay. So now, if I wrote that in a writ of attaint, and that's a writ that the district court judge couldn't even do, and based off the consequences of a writ of attaint being filed and the judge reading that, because if a writ is requested from a district court judge, the judge first has to review the writ in order to file it. If you didn't have the lawful authority to file a writ, the judge wouldn't file it, like they said in Marbury versus Madison. We don't have the authority. But yet, I filed it, and the consequence for the writ of attaint will be detrimental for whoever that writ of attaint is given to based off the writ of error. And they know they're unlawful because didn't no jury give that error. You gave it. So that means that you're going to suffer the same consequences as if a 12 jury was done. And how I know it, because you're going to be tried by a 12 jury, which you should have gave me the opportunity to do. And with that, I digress. I'm a bad boy.
Well said, King.
Boy. That's heat for you, boy.